Welcome to the Soma Moon Wellness Podcast. Soma Moon Wellness is an online education and movement platform for women. This is a space for better conversations about women's health. I'm Jeanetta Bodie, co-founder of Soma Moon Wellness. And today we're really excited to be here with Andrew Bennett, a doctor of physical therapy and the author of Healing Together. And over the past 6 months, we've been working very closely with him to create a companion course that's available on our website to his book, Healing Together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Andrew. He's spent over 25 years walking alongside individuals and families living with chronic, persistent pain. Through mentorship, coaching, and the practical applications of neuroscience, he has helped people around the world rebuild trust with their bodies and move toward more connected, meaningful lives. Andrew has also been a mentor and teacher for us for the pain science portion of our yoga teacher training for many years. And today we invited him with the hope to give you a chance to get to know the creator and author behind Healing Together and share some context of who his work is for and what Andrew hopes people will take away from his course. So welcome, Andrew. Hi.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
You're so welcome. Andrew, you want to share a little bit about what led you to create the book Healing Together and the course?
The book has probably been in the back of my mind for probably 5 or 10 years. I spend a lot of time teaching a lot of the same concepts. There's a lot of patients who come in with very similar questions. Why am I hurting? Why is this not getting better? Am I crazy? How is it that these other factors are not fixing me the way I'm supposed to be fixed? And so in clinic, you have a practice of there are some things that you say over and over, and those get refined and rebuilt. I found that I was teaching them often. And then when COVID hit, a lot of patients and their families weren't able to access clinics. And I found myself several hours a day, I was coaching pain patients and their families. The pandemic was creating a lot of increased stress financially, increased stress relationally, and obviously those go together to elevate central pain. So the idea was to write these down in hopes to get the ideas in the book out, not just to the pain patient, but really to the pain patient's families. Those are the folks that I feel like and still feel like and believe are the most equipped to take care of patients.
I think one of the most helpful and profound understandings that you shared in your book is explaining the difference between pain. We're going to talk a little bit about chronic pain, but maybe if you could give a short description of the three different types of pain, because we hear all pain is the same and pain is pain, and we want to share a little bit about how you define it differently.
The model that I use is not one I created, but it's one that's been published in the literature. There are several, some more complex than others. I like this one because it's very simple. I like threes. I'm a baseball fan. Three strikes, you're out. Like it's pretty easy. Three steps. And it talks about breaking pain into three components, and one of them being more tissue injury or pathology related. We call that nociceptive pain. And that's what people think about when you fall down and you skin your knee, you burn your hand on the stove. There is an increase in sensation in an area that doesn't normally feel that. The skin is raw and there's new sensation coming into that palm. But it's associated with a particular injury and it follows particular rules. If you burn your left hand, your right elbow doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It's local to where the issue is. In fact, if you burn your hand, you probably don't even feel much down in your forearm if it's a very local burn. So nociceptive pain is very local. It's very specific to the area of injury. And probably the most remarkable component is that it follows a normal timeline for healing. We would expect if you burned your hand in the first 3 or 4 days, it would be really sensitive. But after it's had time to heal and 2 or 3 weeks goes by, it's probably tender, but doesn't have that heightened sense of needing to be protected. And another 3 weeks goes by, 6 weeks now, and you're like, oh yeah, I can move my hand and it doesn't bother me. And you almost forget about it and you get back into normal. So nociceptive pain has this sort of onset after injury, very local, and normal gradual reduction over time. The second type of pain that we talk about is what people think of with nerve pain. And when I say nerve pain, I mean anything that reduces a nerve's blood flow, movement, or space. This is what people think about when they talk about, I got a pinched nerve in my neck. If you've ever smacked your funny bone, that's neuropathic pain. It shoots down, right? It's felt commonly in a very specific pathway to the nerve that has the particular insult, whether that's not getting enough blood flow, not getting enough movement, or something is pressing in on it, taking up the space. The uniqueness about this is the opposite of tissue pain. It's often not felt where the injury is. If you've smacked your funny bone, yeah, you'll feel the local bruise of the nociceptive injury on your elbow. But what you often feel is that weird sensation that goes down into these two fingers. I don't know if you've ever noticed, you never hit your funny bone and feel it in your thumb.
Yeah.
You
I was just thinking
always
that.
feel it in these fingers, right?
Yeah.
Because the ulnar nerve, the one that you actually hit, you smash it up against the condyles of your elbow, it feeds this part of your hand. It doesn't feed this part of your hand.
Mhm.
And so you'll only feel it in a very specific pathway. The same is true with pinched nerves in the neck, pinched nerves in the brachial plexus. Wherever that nerve goes is very specific and it's mapped very, very well. Yes, there's some variation among people. Everybody's a little bit different, but the pathway of the nerve is very specific. My experience is that nerve pain, true neuropathic pain, it's harsh. It's very ugly. It's very unstable. It tends to flare immediately and take a long time to reduce down. In other words, if you go back to our example of the nociceptive pain and you bang your hand after you've burned it, it's going to hurt for what, a minute?
Mhm.
And then it just sort of calms down because you're not continually to hit the burn and it seems to simmer. Nerve pain, if you do something that irritates the nerve pain, it can last days or even weeks of this excruciating pain. My sense is that the brain uses the input from the nerve to understand what's going on in that sense of the body. And when that nerve isn't functioning, it's like the brain is trying to pay more attention and more attention. I'm not hearing. It's like being on your phone or having your headphones in and the song gets quiet and you're like, is it fading? I'm not sure. And you turn it up and you turn it up and you turn it up, and all of a sudden you realize I wasn't missing it. It was just between songs. And then bam, the next song comes in and it's super loud. I think that's a good way of explaining to patients why nerve pain feels so harsh and it feels so difficult. And nerve pain, while it can get better with time, there's not a predictable timeline in how nerve pain gets better. The nerve pain will resolve almost immediately if you restore the blood flow, movement, or the space around the nerve. I've had patients we've identified in our physical therapy clinic that they have neuropathic pain, and it is appropriate for the surgeon to go in and clip out a little disc or to do something to get the space off the nerve. Or occasionally we can be in the clinic and put them in a position that takes the pressure off the nerve. And within 30 seconds to a minute, probably 75% of their pain is gone. Now, unfortunately, they stand back up and the space gets occupied again and those symptoms come back. So that's a very common predictor of the neuropathic pain. So nociceptive, think more tissue like a burn or a scratch. Peripheral neuropathic pain or nerve pain is probably an easier way to think of things from the spine out. So if it's pinched in the spinal cord or where the nerves exit, or it's pinched down in your body. The third type we call persistent central pain. Central pain often starts as either a tissue pain, a tissue injury, or a nerve pathology that gets blood flow, movement, or space usurped and doesn't get the attention it needs, or it doesn't get better, or it becomes amplified through things like trauma, the mental anguish that goes around with not being able to find a cure. We see this a lot in patients that maybe they had an injury and it was misdiagnosed, or they thought they could get better and they just kept hanging in and it didn't get better. And by the time they start to seek care, some changes occur in the brain. That doesn't always start that way. Sometimes central pain just spontaneously begins. There are some predictors that we know that make people more likely to have an onset of central pain. It's hard to predict who's actually going to get central pain. A central pain is when the brain begins to change how it is interpreting information from your body and the response it's making to that decision, to that information. So, central pain is how your brain interprets or receives the information from your body. So, the nerves, the sensation that's coming up from your body, how that information is getting into the brain, and the decisions the brain makes subconsciously. This is not your mind, this is the actual organ, how that electrical and chemical activity is processed. The decision making gets altered. And that's when central pain, the beast and the ugly thing that we know it is.
Yeah. I think I would pause here and just recognize, because one of the things that you talk about in your book is how many patients come to you and have had this feeling of this pain is in my head, it's in my brain, like nobody believes me and I don't know what to do. When I began to understand the three different types of pain, you just have so much more compassion for the misunderstanding and the patient. One of my questions for you is, knowing that with chronic pain, you hear that phrase, it's in your brain or it's in your head. And we just talked about the difference between the brain and the mind. How do you explain the brain's role in pain in a way that leaves people feeling validated instead of dismissed?
What comes up in me is the compassion of a clinician when I sit in the room with those patients.
Yeah.
And I mean, hundreds of them have just said, "You're the first person that's ever helped me understand that this makes sense." Or the number of patients who are crying or frustrated or angry and literally punching a hole in my clinic wall because nobody has an answer and they're tired of hurting. So, yes, do I have compassion for that? Completely, because I've seen so many people. And unfortunately, in the academics setting, in the fancy neuroscience world,
Mhm.
there's a lot of emerging literature that is talking about brain science and pain science and neuroscience and all of the cutting edge fill in the blank science.
Yeah.
And often well-intended clinicians have gone to a weekend course or they've gone through a certification program or read some books or some studies, and they errantly apply this knowledge in a way that tends to backfire. I've watched clinicians poorly deliver this message about the pain being in your brain, and I've had patients storm out in anger. I've had to rescue multiple interns and residents where encounters are not going well because there isn't a sense of compassion. There's a sense of diagnosis.
Mhm.
There's a sense of, oh, we've found your problem. Your problem is in your brain. And now we'll just fix your brain and you'll be fine. Well, that's really not true. Yes, it's partially true. The pain is in your brain, but it's the brain's response. It's the brain's effort to keep you safe, alive, and well, and it got disoriented. And until it is reoriented to a place of safety, security, and belonging, it's going to be very hard for your brain to return to its original state of processing, its safe sense of processing. And often when people deliver, oh, it's pain science, it's in your head, or chronic pain is in your brain, what patients don't hear is that they're safe and they're secure and they belong. What they feel and hear is that they're labeled. And now they're the lepers of the medical colony. Out there, unclean. I don't want you. And oh my God, the next chronic pain patient's coming in, and that's going to suck up all the energy and time I have. Unfortunately, I think that comes from people who just aren't experienced providers, who aren't experienced with pain science knowledge, or are lacking a sense of ability to communicate their own compassion. I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah. This is the whole reason for the whole self portion of Soma Moon is education. We've said this before. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can't give what you don't have. You have to learn it yourself, whether it's from nervous system regulating tools, pain science, pelvic health, any of that. all of the courses and the programs, Andrew's Healing Together course, particularly around pain, is about educating and understanding. My hope in the creation of the course is that when someone reads and goes through your program, they now have questions to ask. Be like,
Mhm.
hey, I heard this, help me understand this. And I think that really plays into the importance of the partner. And you wrote the book for the partner and
Great.
helping conversations at home where you feel the safest. So maybe you talk about the role of the partner in the communication and family.
The partner plays a role that has more influence and is more powerful than even the medical team and physician. It's different. It doesn't replace the need for a physician or the need for a good therapist. It doesn't replace that. And I want to be very careful when I use the word partner. I struggled for a long time to figure out what's the right word. Is it your special friend? Is it your partner? Is it your spouse? Is it your buddy? Like what do you call this person? And so I ended up choosing the word partner in the sense that what partner means, not who partner is.
Mm, that's good.
Partner means someone that is committed to your well-being, someone that is committed to journeying along with you. So if you're a chronic pain patient and you're watching this or reading this book and you're like, well, I don't have a wife or a spouse or a lover, or I don't have a partner, that's baloney. Partner means finding someone who's willing to walk with you on the journey. In fact, one of the stories in the book, we even used an example purposefully where a woman that I was treating, her husband was not the right partner at the time for her journey out of pain. And we found two good friends that were willing to partner with her. So again, I just want to caveat this with it doesn't have to be a life partner, doesn't have to be a spouse or a helpmate, but there is something about being with someone who is committed to your well-being. There's a concept in leadership we talk about a lot. We use the word lifting your lid, this idea that as you try to grow and as you try to get better, you hit a ceiling, you hit a lid that you just can't get beyond. And it takes an external influence to recognize that and begin to remove it or change it. The same is true in the recovery from persistent pain. Persistent pain patients, their brains have been hardwired, changed. They do not recognize patterns that are variant from the pattern that they have. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat in a clinic with a patient and the first time they come in and we're going through their body chart, kind of a picture of a body on a piece of paper, and we're circling all the areas that hurt. Back pain's often one of them. And I'll ask questions like, well, how long have you had back pain? Oh, I've had back pain for 15 years. Okay. Does it come? Does it go? Is it always there? Oh, it's always there. Okay, it's always present. So is it sometimes it's worse than others? Oh, no, it's always bad. Okay, it's always present and it's always bad. It doesn't change. No, it doesn't change. Okay, so does your pain ever get worse than what you're feeling right now? Oh my God, yeah, it's terrible. It gets up to, even in that little example, they're not lying, they're not exaggerating.
Yeah.
They literally cannot recognize that the pattern they're describing is not the pattern they're living in.
Mhm.
And that is a brain change. It's hardwired into them that pain is always there. Pain is going to prevent me from getting up in the morning. Pain is going to prevent me from doing the things. And the anticipation, or in the book, we talk about the prediction of pain, is as hampering as pain itself because the brain begins to predict that you're going to have pain in this circumstance. And so it begins to run the chemical process, to run the electrical process in preparation for bracing itself against the pain, which actually creates the pain.
Yeah. I broke my collarbone in September. If you're following along on our Substack blog, I will be writing about the story of recovery using Andrew's book and explaining pain in three different lenses with a real story. But one of the things that I noticed as my tissue issue was healing, I would get back on the bike and my brain would shut down. It would be like, no, 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 we can't do this anymore. My partner's role in this was so important to me because what I did is I got on the back on the bike and I was like, I don't ever want to ride again. I don't ever want to ride that trail. I just going to keep it safe. And what happened is my world got smaller and
Hmm.
the
Yep.
things that I love got smaller. And he was so good at writing with me and be like, I'm right here. Hey, let's try this. What do you think about trying this? And then I remember I hit a rock and I fumbled over something and I just burst into tears and then I was done. And I was like, oh, I'm okay. It's almost that capacity building and that resilience. These are where I believe the tools of yoga and somatic, just understanding the body and being like, oh, yeah, it's safe to feel this comes into play. So I just want to say thank you for that because I was literally living your book as we were working on the course. The last question I want to talk about is honestly, I think it's probably your thesis is you talking about the importance of the triad, the dignity, self-efficacy, and hope, and how these
Yeah.
kind of anchors to getting out of chronic pain. So if somebody feels like they don't know where to start or they don't know what to do, can you share a little bit about why these three are so important?
Yes. Instead of talking about it, let's put it in context of me maybe meeting with a pain patient who's had pain for 10 or 15 years. And like you mentioned, their world's gotten very, very small. And not only are they no longer losing the things that bring them joy, they're losing the ability to play their role in the world.
Mm.
They can't go to work. They can't pick up the kiddo. Grocery shopping annihilates their energy. They can't be intimate with their spouse. They have to choose between the enormous amount of pain at the end of the day or going to their kid's Little League baseball game. When that happens, the world gets really, really, really small, and you become a prisoner in your own body. One of the things we know about prisoners, if you look at the data around those that have survived German concentration camps or those that have survived POW situations, it's those who believed and had hope
Mm.
for a beautiful life and relationship with someone after they got out. Those people had a higher level of resilience. Those people were able to navigate that. And so when you apply that to pain patients, in my experience, very, very few of chronic persistent pain patients have a belief and a hope that tomorrow can look different than it does today. They get promised, oh, we can do this procedure and that'll make you better. And it might for a little bit, but then the pain comes back, and often it comes back worse. Or we can just up your medication. Well, that dulls it, numbs it, but it numbs and dulls me. And so I get deeper and deeper in this sense of hopelessness. Hopelessness is the belief that tomorrow will not be any different than what I'm experiencing today. So, with the absence of hope, where I don't believe that tomorrow will be any different, you begin to believe that what you can do today has zero impact on tomorrow. Well, because tomorrow's never going to be any different, then what the hell am I doing? Why should I even try? The psychology literature has a word for that, that sense of agency, that sense of a belief that I can do something and affect my conditions around. They call that self-efficacy. That I believe if I practice more, I can get better at my guitar. I believe if I run every day and I restrict my calories, I can lose a little bit of weight. That's a sense of self-efficacy. In pain, chronic pain patients particularly, they've exhausted their self-efficacy. It's not that they didn't have it, although I think sometimes patients are through trauma or through abuse or through whatever the onset, their self-efficacy was instantaneously removed from them. And I think that plays a different role. But for the majority of patients that have sort of trickled into chronic pain, self-efficacy was, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to get better. I'm just going to stay at the gym. I'm going to go to work regardless. And then they push and then it falls apart and the pain continues. In fact, it gets worse. And then they pick themselves up and they go find another specialist who's going to go find a specific answer. And there's the thing. And you have this random, weird, strange, medicalized explanation for your pain. And we do this intervention or we put you on this procedure and it doesn't last. And so self-efficacy begins to just collapse over time. It's almost like the hamster in the cage. They get trained that it doesn't matter what you do. And so they adopt this belief that if I am to get better, it has to happen from somebody out there. It has to be somebody in a lab coat. It has to be some MRI scan. It has to be some surgeon somewhere. It can't happen from me. because I've failed over and over and over again. And when you see that self-efficacy around their desire to get better collapse, they begin to believe that their self-efficacy on making their life, their family life, their job life, their financial status, their relationship status, it also crumbles.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when self-efficacy erodes, your dignity erodes. The dignity is the sense that who I am and what I have to offer the world has value. But it's got to have value to somebody. It's got to be witnessed and affirmed that who I am and what I have has value. I need somebody externally to validate that, or it just doesn't translate into me being able to do something. In other words, as a chronic pain patient, if I don't believe who I am and what I have has any value, then why make any effort? Why try to make my relationship better? Why try to make my life better? Because I don't have any power and I myself don't have any value to add. So I'll just punch out. This is where the partner's able to come in and deliberately work on affirming the sense of dignity that, yeah, our life is hard. Yes, there's a lot of our life that we've lost, or that your life that you've lost because of pain, but you still have value and you still have worth. And I'm going to validate these specific ways in which you add value and worth to my life. And often they're not related to big doing things. They're related to relationship. And then as that value begins to be restored, as that sense of dignity begins to be restored, often the pain patient will want to demonstrate that value or will be invited to act on that sense of dignity by doing something. And that begins to bridge back into self-efficacy. So if you have a belief that who you are and what you have is value, then you begin to say, but that value can do something. That worth can impact something in my life in some small way. And that gets continually affirmed and witnessed by your partner. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but you did it, you were present, you were with us, it made a difference. Then, ironically, what happens is the brain begins to soften. The brain begins to get a little bit more safe, secure, seen. And some of those persistent pain changes begin to fade. Some of the way that the brain processes information begins to fade. And then you infuse into that a lot of the tools and the techniques that we talk about in the book of actually guiding this brain back into its normal way of being in the world and reclaiming a way of being present with one another. Then it begins to have these moments. I just clearly remember that there's such a wonderful moment that occurs in the clinic where the patient looks at you and goes, holy shit.
Hmm.
But something magical occurs when there's a sense of hope that, wait, maybe fragile hope, but maybe tomorrow can be different than today.
Yeah. And I think that is the reason why everybody should be reading your book. I really do, because I feel like that message
Thank you.
is so completely lost, whether it's somebody trying to have the answers that just wants to help and doesn't have access to the right answers to the education, or is feeling completely lost. So if you are in persistent chronic pain, if this conversation stood out, I would encourage you to read Andrew's book, because Andrew does a really good job of taking something very, very complex and breaking it down to understandable bite-sized pieces with story that goes into it. And I feel like your course that you created with us is almost like a coffee date with you, talking about each chapter. It's almost like your perfect counselor over pain and PT in your pocket.
Kudos to you because this was not something I wanted to do. This is something you were like, hey, I want you to do this. I think it would be useful. And I'm like, God, really? Okay. So kudos to you for coming up with the idea and for making it happen, you and Steph both. When I sat down, I purposefully recorded it in my clinic because there's a part of me that shows up a little differently there. That's where I've had all those conversations. But I really tried to take it on as if the person that I'm talking to, the person that I'm encountering, is actually sitting in the clinic with me. And we're going to have very personal, very specific conversations to help you not just read the book, but actually have an idea of how to apply that to your situation.
I think you did a great job on that. So
Thanks.
good job. Well done. I
Thank you.
know
Yeah.
anytime we do recordings with people, you're like, oh my God, no, it's work. It's magical. And the course really does. It goes chapter by chapter. We've created PDFs from Andrew's resource section that you can print off and you can do either from the book or with your partner. It's really designed to teach you all of these things that Andrew is explaining so that you feel like there's hope. That's it. We want to give you some hope around pain because we both have worked with people with pain. I'm super excited. Next week, we will have one of your former patients who has gotten out of pain. So we get to hear her story. So if you are listening, stick around for that next week. You're doing good work. Thank you. Thanks for being with us and for spending time with us today. If you want to go deeper with this work, you can find the Healing Together companion course and more education and movement resources at somamoonwellness.com. Andrew's book, Healing Together, is available on Amazon and his website, absimplicity.com. Our work is designed to meet you where you are right now with steady tools that you can return to one step at a time. Take what's useful, leave the rest, and care for yourself in a way that honors who you are right now. Be well, be loved, be blessed. Namaste.